Hello everyone, I welcome you to my YouTube channel Professor Civil Mandal. Here I speak about civil engineering and you will find my various video lectures regarding various topics of civil engineering over here. So this is the third part of the video, and in this we'll be dealing with another topic of hydrology, that is evaporation. And previously in the previous three videos, in the first video we have started about the introduction of engineering hydrology as to what all the aspects which we deal in engineering hydrology. That was in our first video, in the introductory video. And in the second video we studied about the precipitation, and also in the third video we did some more topics related to precipitation. So the second and the third video were dedicated to precipitation only. So here now in the fourth video we will start a new topic, that is evaporation. And evaporation, as you know, is the process by which water changes from liquid to a gas or vapor. So evaporation, as you know, water from any water bodies, the surface water body will try to evaporate. Actually it will try to convert itself into the vapor form from the liquid form into which it was available earlier. So it will form to a vapor form and it will rise up to the atmosphere to form the clouds. So this we knew as our process of evaporation. So this is our process of evaporation by which water changes from a liquid to a gas or vapor. Evaporation is the primary pathway that water moves from the liquid states back into the hydrological cycle as atmospheric water vapor. So out of all the methods by which one source can actually transform the liquid water to the vapor form into the atmosphere, into the hydrological cycle, is the primary amongst them is the evaporation. See, it can occur through some other processes like transpiration also, but evaporation is considered primary because it occurs mostly and in large volume too. Next, evaporation is actually a cooling process. So evaporation is actually a cooling process in which the latent heat of vaporization must be provided by water body itself. So there should be some latent heat of vaporization that will actually help the conversion to take place from liquid water to the vapor form of water vapor, and this conversion will be done with the help of latent heat of vaporization only. That latent heat allows the conversion from the liquid state to the gaseous state, and this latent heat is provided by the water body itself. So the latent heat of vaporization of water is 585 calorie per gram. You can remember this one. The difference between boiling and evaporation is that the boiling is a bulk phenomenon. So boiling is bulk phenomenon. So it occurs as a whole. So if you are putting one vessel full of water on a gas oven and you are just lighting it up, the whole of the system will be exposed to boiling. The whole system will be boiling, whereas for evaporation it is a surface phenomenon. It's not like that the whole of the ocean water, the water from any part of the ocean will start evaporating. It is only occurring at the surface. But for boiling, it occurs in the whole system, in the whole vessel, in the water which is present in the whole vessel. So boiling is somehow like that it will occur in the whole vessel. That is, it is a bulk phenomenon, whereas evaporation works only on the surface. So it is a surface phenomenon. Boiling needs external source of heating, whereas evaporation doesn't. So in case of boiling, there is some external heat is required, like you need to light up something beneath the vessel so that the water starts boiling. Without that lighting up, without that fire, you cannot actually start the evaporation process. You cannot start the boiling process. Like even if you are not using any fire, suppose you are cooking it on some induction oven. So in that induction, you need to set that right amount of temperature. You need to give the heat from the oven, from the pan of the evaporation, from the pan of the induction, so that the actual boiling will take place in that particular vessel, in the water present in that particular vessel. But for evaporation we don't need any source of heat. There is no source of heating required. You may say that because of sun the evaporation is occurring. No, it's not the right thing. Evaporation also occurs in the night time. Okay, evaporation also occurs in the night time, and this is why not only in the daytime, even in the night time, if we keep our clothes for drying up outside in our terrace or somewhere, so that drying up will also take place in the night time, irrespective of whether the sun is present or not. In the night time it will also occur, that evaporation process will also occur. So evaporation doesn't need any external source of heating. Yeah, some external source of heating will actually agitate the process, it will make it faster, but some other source is actually not required for in this case. So evaporation can solely be done without any other application of any heat energy or any other source which is applying heat to the system. So next we discuss about the factors affecting the evaporation. The factors that affect the evaporation are the temperature, surface area of the liquid, humidity of the air, wind speed, and some soluble salts. So just in case, you should remember these 5 factors which will actually affect the evaporation. How will they affect? Now let us read about them in detail. That for temperature, the rate of evaporation increases on increasing with the temperature of the liquid. So if you increase the temperature of the liquid, the rate of evaporation will increase. Just as I said you that in the daytime the rate of evaporation is higher as compared to night time. Yeah, evaporation occurs in both the cases, in both day and night, but evaporation occurs more in the daytime, because we have an external heating due to the sun. When the temperature of a liquid is increased by heating it, more particles of the liquid get enough kinetic energy to get it into the vapor state. So as you know from the school standard chemistry, that we need to provide some kinetic energy in order to convert some liquid form to the gaseous form. As you know that the gaseous forms have higher kinetic energy, but in this case due to the heating, the particles will already have some kinetic energy. So just little bit of evaporation will actually lead to much more evaporation as compared to what happens in the absence of some heating or in some lower temperature. So the presence of high temperature will actually imbibe a little bit of kinetic energy, so that it can easily go to the state of gas, and that amount of kinetic energy can be easily achievable for that particular particles of that liquid. So the temperature thus gives the kinetic energy to the particles. Next is the surface area of the liquid. So in our daily life we spread out the washed clothes while trying to increase their surface area or for rapid evaporation of water present in them. We are able to sip hot tea faster from a saucer than from a cup. This is because a saucer has a larger surface, and due to the large surface of saucer, the evaporation of hot tea from the saucer is faster. We conclude that the rate of evaporation, I will highlight this one, the rate of evaporation of a liquid can be increased by increasing the surface area of the liquid. So you got the 2 examples, that if we spread out our washed clothes, so it will be getting dried up quickly. So it's not like that you just keep it jumbled in one place. It will be in somehow not spreaded out properly, and you are expecting that it will be drying faster. No, it won't be happening. To make the cloth dry faster, you need to spread that one out. And also if you are going to take a hot tea in a cup, you will feel the heat. But if the same tea, if you put in a saucer, or or the plate or the china dish which you are using to keep the cup, if you pour the tea over there and try to drink the tea from that saucer or that plate, you will see that it will be easier for you. You will feel less amount of heat. It is because the surface area, more will be the rate of evaporation. So more evaporation, if the more evaporation takes place, the heating, the hotness will also reduce. Somehow the hotness will reduce. So that's why it is easy to drink the tea from a saucer or from a plate rather than drinking the tea from a cup. And similarly, why if we spread out our washed clothes on the wire or on the rooftop, so that they get dried up very quickly. So surface area, more the surface area, we get more rate of evaporation. So how does the humidity of air gives the role? So the humidity of air, when the humidity of air is low, take a note that when the humidity of air is low, the rate of evaporation is higher and water evaporates more readily. If the humidity is low, the water will evaporate more readily. The wet clothes dry quickly under the conditions of low humidity of air. This is because when humidity is low, amount of water vapor present in the air is small. So suppose those who live near the coastal areas, they will experience it better because the humidity is more in coastal area as compared to the ones in the hilly areas or the dry areas like the desert or something like that. So those who are staying in the places which have a lot of humidity, so you can see that during the period of June, July, just in case as we are in India, during June, July, August, the level of humidity is actually higher during the monsoon. But as compared to what it is in summer or winter, the humidity is quite less in that time. So what happens if you put one cloth in a humid weather condition? Suppose you are sweating that day a lot. So how to know that that day is a humid day? You can easily know it by, if you are sweating that day a lot, then you can say that it is a humid day. But in case you are not sweating a lot, you will say that the humidity is not much present. So the day when you sweat a lot, just take a note of this thing. The day when you sweat a lot, if you put the clothes for drying up, the clothes will actually take time to dry up. But on the other hand, the day you are not sweating a lot, the day in you are not sweating a lot, like in the dry seasons, like the winter seasons, what will happen? If you just also note this thing, that if you put the clothes for drying, they will dry quickly. Of course, in summer we do have large amount of humidity, but also in summer there is some good amount of heat from the sun, a high temperature. That's why the evaporation occurs quickly. But in winter, when the temperature is not that much high, still the evaporation will occur quickly as compared to that in the monsoon. Why? Because winter is a dry season and the humidity will be less in the winter season, whereas for monsoon period the humidity will be very high, and during the monsoon period only actually you will have some sweat as compared to what you have during the winter season. In winter season you won't have any sweat. Actually your skin will get drier because the temperature is not at all humid, the weather is not at all humid. So in that case the clothes will dry up faster when the weather is not humid. So the reason why they say, it is saying that because when the humidity is low, the amount of water vapor present in the air is small. So this humidity is actually due to the presence of water vapor in the atmosphere. So the humidity is a measure of the amount of water vapor that is present in the atmosphere. So in low humidity we will have less amount of water vapor in the atmosphere. So the atmosphere will be able to suck more amount of water vapors from other sources. So therefore the evaporation takes place quickly in the less humid climate. But in the humid climate where already lot amount of water vapor is present, so the atmosphere won't be able to suck up that much amount of water vapor that was present from the other sources. So that's why this thing happens in the case of humidity. Next is the wind speed. So the wind speed is the rate of evaporation of a liquid increases with the increase of the wind speed. So if the wind speed increases, the rate of evaporation will also increase. When the wind speed increases, the particles of water vapor move away with the wind, decreasing the amount of water vapor in the surroundings. This increases the rate of evaporation. Suppose some amount of evaporation is taking place in a particular region. Some amount of evaporation is taking place in a particular region, but there is some good amount of wind flowing in that place. So what will happen? The evaporated water vapor won't be able to stay in the atmosphere for longer time. The wind that will be coming, that will actually blow it away. High the speed of the wind, so high amount of water vapor will be blown away. So that's why when the water vapor will be blown away, what will happen? Again the atmosphere will be vacant. It will be devoid of water vapor. So again the evaporation process will continue. But suppose the wind is not blowing. So the wind will blow actually, but we have a very less speed of wind, like 1 or 2 kilometers, 2 to 3 kilometers. So what will happen? The what amount of water vapor that will be coming to the atmosphere from the other sources due to the evaporation, what will happen? The water vapor will remain in that part of the atmosphere for longer time. But if we have some wind speed something around 30-40 kilometers, let's say it's a very windy day, so what will happen? That wind will blow away those water vapor particles, thereby creating some amount of space again for new water vapor particles to come and take that place in the atmosphere. So we will have some more amount of evaporation, as it would not happen in the case of less windy day. So next is the soluble salts. So the soluble salts, when the salts are present, the vapor pressure is decreased, and hence the rate of evaporation is also decreased. So presence of salt will actually decrease the vapor pressure, and thus the rate of evaporation will also get decreased. So the methods to remove evaporation losses are: either you reduce the surface area, as we have learned that more the surface area, more will be the evaporation taking place. So if we reduce the surface area, so we can reduce the evaporation losses. Nextly, providing the mechanical cover for the water bodies. So in the water bodies, suppose if we want to minimize the evaporation loss, so if you have a very large water body, what will happen? A huge amount of water vapor will be actually getting evaporated. So for that, what we try to do is that, suppose if you are making an open tank, you try to make the open tank in such a shape that the top part will have less surface area as compared to that one in the bottom part. Okay, just like a frustum of a cone. If an open tank is made like a frustum of a cone, so what will happen? The top will have some less area. So I will make the diagram of the frustum of a cone. What will happen? This top part will have less surface area as compared to what is there in the bottom. So therefore, the less evaporation will take place from here. But if it was somehow like this, like a cylindrical, a normal tank or a well, the more evaporation will take place. As you can see, the surface area is more. So what we can do is we can reduce the surface area. Somehow we try to reduce the top surface area so that less evaporation is prone to that water body. Next is the providing mechanical covers. Let us try to, whatever water body is there, we try to provide a mechanical cover, and thus we will prevent the water vapor to get evaporated, right? And finally, providing some chemical pills which reduces the vapor pressure, like hexadecanol or octadecanol. So as we have seen that presence of salt, that vapor pressure is decreased, hence the rate of evaporation will also decrease. So if we provide some chemical pills, mostly some salts, that will reduce the evaporation rate, that will reduce the vapor pressure of the that water body. So what will happen? On doing that, we can somehow counteract the amount of evaporation that is taking place. The methods to determine the evaporation are as follows. The two methods for measurement of evaporation are the direct methods, indirect methods, and also there is one method, that is the empirical method. Let's just make it three methods that will help us to determine the amount of evaporation that is taking place. So direct method includes the water budget technique and the lysimeter, the pan evaporation, and that's it. So in the direct methods we are seeing these three types of evaporation. First is the water budget technique. That is quite similar to the water budget equation, that we have this as the equation, where E is equal to I minus O plus minus delta S, where E is the evaporation, I is the inflow into the soil reservoir, which is equal to irrigation water plus precipitation plus incoming soil water contribution from surrounding plus the groundwater. So what all possible inflow that can occur to a reservoir? First is the irrigation water that is coming from the irrigation sources. Secondly is the precipitation that is occurring. Nextly is the incoming soil water contribution. Suppose some soil water is also coming due to the infiltration or the groundwater runoff, also due to the groundwater recharge. So these are the four ways that can include as the inflow to one soil reservoir. So whenever some water resource engineer is going to work on the inflow of a particular reservoir, he will consider all these factors. Also next is O is the deep percolation, that is the inside soil runoff, and finally we have the delta S. Delta S means the change in storage, just as we did in the case of precipitation. Next is the lysimeter. A lysimeter is a measuring device which can be used to measure the amount of actual evapotranspiration which is released by plants, usually crops or trees. So this is a measuring device which can be used to measure the amount of actual evapotranspiration that is occurring in a particular plant. So mostly you know that evapotranspiration occurs in the plants only. The plants are the only source of this evapotranspiration process. So what we do, that we provide some gadget known as a lysimeter, and we try to estimate the amount that is being evaporated by that particular plants. So by recording the amount of precipitation that an area receives and the amount lost through the soil, the amount of water lost to evapotranspiration can be calculated. So this is one way you can calculate that the amount of precipitation, you know, the amount of soil that is remaining, amount of water that is remaining in the soil, and thus the difference will give you the water lost due to the evapotranspiration. The monolithic weighable lysimeters are a tool of water balance studies and solute transport determination. So monolithic weighable lysimeters are available commercially, and these are also very useful for studying the water balance studies and researches, and also the solute transport determination. Lysimeters are of two types, the weighing type and the non-weighing type. Next is the pan evaporation. The pan evaporation is a measurement that combines or integrates the effects. Pan evaporation is a measurement that combines or integrates the effects of several climate elements, that is temperature, humidity, rainfall, drought dispersion, solar radiation and wind. So the pan evaporation is a technique where we actually try to combine the effects of temperature, humidity, rainfall, drought dispersion, solar radiation and wind on a particular pan which has actually some amount of water. Okay, and we have this equation, that is E is equal to A multiplied by C pan multiplied by E pan, where E is the annual evaporation, A is the area of water surface, C pan is the pan coefficient, and E pan is the pan evaporation coefficients. So how to denote the pan coefficient? Pan coefficient is denoted by this way. You can see in the table Class A pan or the land pan is 0.6 to 0.8. ISI pan modified class A, it's 0.65 to 1.1. Colorado sunken pan 0.75 to 8.86. USGS floating pan, it is 0.7 to 0.82. So the type of pan you will be using, that will affect your pan coefficient. Next is the indirect methods, that is the empirical methods for evapotranspiration measurement. So you can call that indirect method is also the empirical method, and this includes the aerodynamic method or the mass transfer method, the energy budget method, the Penman equation, the Jensen-Hayes method, Hargreaves method. And finally we will read about the empirical evaporation equation, which will include the Mayer's formula, Roberts formula. That's it. Okay, so let's start this one, that is aerodynamic indirect methods of the empirical or the empirical methods for evaporation measurement. First is the aerodynamic method or the mass transfer method. The numerous empirical formulas have been derived from the which express evaporation as function of atmospheric, but mostly they are based on the Dalton's law and as given as follows. So this is the equation: E is equal to CES minus E multiplied by FU, where C is a constant and ES is the SVP, that is the standard vapor pressure. E is equal to AVP, actual vapor pressure, U is equal to wind speed. So this is one such formula, that is the aerodynamic method, to denote the amount of evaporation. Next is the energy budget method. Like the water budget method, we also have the energy budget method. Previously the water budget method was actually based on the balance between the amount of water or the flow of water. Energy budget method will be the balance between the flow of energy, right? See how it is occurring, that is Rn is equal to E plus A plus S plus C, EASC. Remember it like this, EASC. Rn is equal to E plus A plus S plus C. So Rn is the net available energy radiation from the sun. So Rn is basically the radiation from the sun, the energy due to the radiation from sun. E is the energy due to the evaporation. A is the heating by air. S is the energy used in heating water, and C is the energy used in heating the surrounding of water. So these are the four things that will be used to denote the value of Rn. This was the energy budget method. Next is the Penman equation. Penman is a scientist who developed this equation, combination of the aerodynamics and energy budget equation, and it is somehow like this. It's a complex form of equation. Next is the Jensen-Hayes method, and based on the energy balance equation, approximately 1000 measurements of evapotranspiration over 35 years period at 20 locations in western US were made for this method or equation. This is the equation: ETO is equal to C TA minus TX multiplied by RS. The climate data needed for it includes the solar radiation, mean daily temperature, and long-term maximum air temperature for the month of the highest mean air temperature and elevation above sea level. So first you need to check which month has got the highest mean air temperature, and in that month you are going to check for the solar radiation, mean daily temperature, and the long-term maximum air temperature. Okay, and by this then you will apply it in this particular formula and you will get the amount of evaporation that is taking place. Next is the Hargreaves method, also called the Hargreaves pan evaporation method. The standard National Weather Service Class A pan is most widely used evaporation pan in the US. The evaporation pan of this standard set made of stainless steel and has the dimension of a Class A evaporation pan. The evaporation pan is installed on the wooden support which is set and leveled on the ground in a grassy location, away from the bushes, trees and other obstacles which obstruct a natural air flow through the pan, thus representing open water in an open area. So ET is equal to Kp into Epan, where Epan is the measured value of evaporation by US Class A open pan evaporimeter and Kp is the pan coefficient. Finally is the empirical evaporation equation. So previously these were also some empirical methods, but these are indirect methods. And nextly the third one is the purely empirical evaporation equations, and these are more referred to as empirical because these are mostly derived from the experimental works. First is the Meyer's formula, and it is given by EL is equal to Km EW minus EA multiplied by 1 plus U9 upon 16. So what are the notations? U9 is the monthly mean wind velocity in km per hour at about 9 meter above the ground, whereas Km is the coefficient accounting for various other factors with a value of 0.36 for large deep and 0.5 for small shallow waters. EW and EA. EW is the saturation vapor pressure at the water temperature in mm of mercury, and EA is the actual vapor pressure in the air in mm of mercury. Next is the Raoult's formula. The Raoult's formula is EL equal to 0.771 multiplied by 1.465 minus 0.000732 PA multiplied by 0.44 plus 0.0733 U naught multiplied by EW minus EA. So this is quite a typical clumsy formula, but you need to remember it if the question asks you to solve using Raoult's formula. So the question come by using this method only, and you have to use this particular formula. So try to make a sequence and mug it up in nice way, write it up so that you remember it all the time. PA is the mean barometric reading in the mm of mercury. EW is the saturation vapor pressure at the water temperature in mm of mercury. EA is the actual vapor pressure in the air in mm of mercury, and U naught is the mean wind velocity in km per hour at ground level, which can be taken to be velocity at 0.6 meter height above the ground. And also the wind velocity UH will be given by CH whole to the power 1, CH to the power 1 by 7, where UH is the wind velocity at height H, right? U naught was the mean wind velocity in km per hour, whereas UH is the wind velocity at a particular height H, and that UH can be obtained by C multiplied by H to the power 1 by 7, where C is a particular constant. So this equation can be used to determine the velocity at any desired level. To study about the numericals which are related to the precipitation chapter. So first, let us read our first question. The first question says that calculate the daily lake evaporation from the following data from a class A pan. Assume pan coefficient as 0.75, and we are given the table where we have date, the daily rainfall and the water added. So you can see that water is being added in the first 2 days, that is 8 and 12, so it is represented with plus symbol, whereas it is being subtracted on the 3rd day, so therefore it is -5. So you can say that it's not water added, you can say that it is water taken out. So to do this problem, what I am doing, first I'll let you know that the daily pan evaporation is equal to the sum of the rainfall plus or minus the water added. Why minus? If the water is taken out, then it will be a minus, and if the water is added, it will be a plus. So in this case, just as you see, for day 1 I have written the table like this, which was horizontal in the question. I have represented it vertically, and I have written the data which are already given in the question in black ink. That is, the days are written, the water added, and the rainfall. Like this I have written. And just for the first day, you can see on 7/6/97 the water added is +8, whereas the rainfall is 6 mm. So the pan evaporation for that day will be the sum of these two, rainfall and water added. So it is the sum of 2 plus 3, column 2 plus column 3. So it will be equal to 8 plus 6 equal to 14 mm. For the second day it will be 12 plus 0, 12. For third day it will be 16 minus 5, as it is minus, water is being taken out, it will be 16 minus 5, that is 11. For the fourth day it will be 10 plus 3, 13, and for the fifth day it will be 9 plus 5, 14. So this was all about my daily pan evaporation, and I have represented them in the fourth column. So the fifth column says about lake evaporation. So the lake evaporation will be equal to the pan coefficient multiplied by the pan evaporation. So pan coefficient is given to us as 0.75. So if I multiply 0.75 with 14, that is the pan evaporation of the day 1. So it will be equal to 10.50. So I can say that 10.50 is the lake evaporation for day 1, as lake evaporation is the product of the pan coefficient and pan evaporation. Nextly, for the second day the lake evaporation will be 0.75 multiplied by 12, and that is equal to 9. For third day it will be 0.75 multiplied by 11, and it will be equal to 8.25. For third day 0.75 multiplied by 13, it will be 9.75, and for the fourth day 0.75 multiplied by 14, again it will be 10.50. So this is how we get the lake evaporation, provided we are given the pan coefficient and the data which says the what amount of water is added or taken out, or what is the rainfall for that particular day. So let's move on to the next question. So the next question reads that a reservoir with a surface area of 300 hectares has the following average meteorological value during a given week. So for a given week, for a reservoir whose surface area is 300 hectares, few datas are given. That is, the water temperature is 30 degrees centigrade, the relative humidity is 50%, and the wind velocity at 1 meter above ground is 12 km per hour. The mean barometer reading is 750 millimeter of mercury, and ES is given as 31.82 millimeter of mercury. So they are asking to estimate the average daily evaporation from the lake reservoir and the volume of water evaporated from the lake during this week. Make use of the Mayer's formula as well as the Rawor's formula to compare the results. So using the two formulas, once by the Mayer's formula and next by the Rawor's formula, we need to calculate the volume of water that is being evaporated in the lake during this week. So the first of all, let's go with the Mayer's formula. So as per the Mayer's formula, so for the Mayer's formula, the Mayer formula says that E is equal to Km, E is equal to Km multiplied by ES minus EA multiplied by U plus 1 plus U9 by 16. So this is our Mayer's formula, where just take this value that Km is equal to 0.36 for large deep water. Just try to note this thing, that Km is taken as 0.36 for large deep waters. So this is our key to the Km, and Es is, as you know, is the saturation vapor pressure, and it is at 30 degrees centigrade. It is given as 31.82 millimeter of Hg, that is mercury. So the relative humidity is given by the relative humidity. As you know, it is Es upon Ea, and it is 50% according to the question. Es, as you know, it is 31.82 and relative humidity is given 50%. So therefore Ea is equal to 31.82 divided by 0.5 multiplied by 100, and it is equal to 15.91 millimeter of mercury. So 15.91 millimeter of mercury is the value of Ea. That is the Ea is equal to, okay, so now the relative humidity is at 50%, and Ea is given to us as 15.91 and Es is 31.82. So what we are gonna do now, next let us calculate. So Es and Ea, the values are there with us. So next we will go to calculate the value of U9. Okay, so to get the value of U9, it is U9 upon V1, that is equal to 9 by 1 to the power 0.143, and so U9, from here U9 will be equal to 9 to the power 0.143 multiplied by V1 is 12 km per hour. So the answer will be equal to 16.43 km per hour. So this is the value of U9. U9 is equal to 16.43 km per hour. So to get the value of evaporation, it will be E is equal to Km Es minus Ea multiplied by 1 plus U9 by 16, and it is given by 0.36 multiplied by 31.82 minus 15.91 multiplied by 1 plus 16.43 upon 16. This is our formula for E. So by this the value of E will be equal to 11.61 millimeter per day. So this is the value of the evaporation for 1 day only. So for a week, if you want to get the value of evaporation, you have to multiply with the number of days in the week, and also what you need to multiply is the area of that particular place. So then only you will get the total volume of evaporation that is occurring. So the rate of evaporation is given as 11.61 mm per day, and for 7 days and for 7 days and 300 hectare large reservoir, it will be equal to 11.61 is in millimeter. So to make it meter, it will be divided by 1000. So this is in meter now, and multiplied by the 7 days, and next I will multiply with 300 hectares. Now 1 hectare is equal to 10 to the power 1 hectare is equal to 10 to the power 4 meter square. 1 hectare is equal to, you can refer to this, 1 hectare is equal to 10 to the power 4 meter square. So it will be equal to 300 multiplied by 10 to the power 4, and it is meter square. So by multiplying this, we will get the answer as 243,810 meter cube. So this is the total volume of evaporation that is happening in that reservoir for 7 days, and this is by using the Myers-Peters formula, or simply you can see it is by using the Myers formula. Next is the Rover's formula, part B, using Rover's formula. So by using the Rover's formula, what is it? It is E is equal to 0.771. It's a very typical formula, multiplied by 1.465 minus 0.000732 PA multiplied by 0.44 plus 0.0733 V 0.6. This is V 0.6, and that multiplied by ES minus EA. So that's a very huge formula, and you know the value of ES, you know the value of EA. Now what we have to do, we have to determine the value of V 0.6. Also the value of PA is known to us, that is the reading of the barometer, that is equal to 750 millimeter of mercury. ES is known to us, that is ES was equal to 31.82, and EA was equal to 15.91 millimeter of mercury. So ES, EA is known to us. PA is also known to us, that is as 750 millimeter of mercury. What we need to know is the V 0.6, and V 0.6 can be obtained by like this: V 0.6 upon V1 equal to 0.6 divided by 1 whole to the power 0.143, and V 0.6 will be equal to V1, as you know, it's 12 km per hour. 12 multiplied by 0.6 to the power 0.143, and it is equal to, so the value of V 0.6 is equal to it is coming as 11.15 km per hour. So this is the value of V 0.6, 11.15 km per hour. This was our formula for E. Okay, so the next thing what we need to do is calculate E. The next step, we need to calculate E. We need to calculate E, and E will be given by 0.771. Let's just directly substitute the values. 1.465 minus 0.000732, and PA is given by 750 millimeter of mercury multiplied by 0.44 plus 0.0733, and V0.6 is equal to 11.15 km per hour, and we will write that 11.15. and next is multiply it with ES minus EA, that is 31.82 minus EA is 15.91, and this answer is in millimeter per day. So the answer will be equal to 14.13 millimeter per day. To get the value for the whole week and for the whole reservoir, it will be E7 days, and it is a big E, suppose it is for the whole reservoir, and it is equal to 14.13 multiplied by 14.13 divided by 1000. We need to get it into meter, and multiplied by the 7, that is the number of days, and then I have to multiply it with the reservoir volume, that is 300 multiplied by 10 to the power 4. So it will be equal to 'So the answer is coming out to be around 296,730 meter cube. So this is by using the Roberts formula. So just because the formulas are empirical and devised by two different persons, the values are quite different, but it is in general said that the one which is given by this Roberts formula, somehow it gives more correct value, but I don't know there is any such basis of comparison or not. But till then you might note it down that these are the two different answers by using two different formulas. Even the value of the one that we get for per day, that is the millimeter in millimeter per day, for one day it is 14.13 millimeter per day, and for here using the Mayer's formula it is 11.61 millimeter per day. So the answer is varying by the two different methods. So we just got an idea that if we are using two different formulas, so the answers will be different, will not be same, because both of them are actually empirical formulas and they have been designed by the scientist considering particular situation. So this was all about today's video, and I hope you will like it. And also please do not hesitate to write any kind of doubt in the comment section. The comment section is free for you. And also please like and share my video. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Thank you.